Good morning on this Tuesday, March 23rd, 2021. Let it be known, we have a great show in store for you today. We're going to talk about Black farmers, among other things, with our special guest, Briar Blakely, just a little bit after the news. But first, of course, we'd like to bring on our president and CEO, Dr. Benjamin Chavis. Good morning, Dr. Chavis.
Good morning, Stacy. And on behalf of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Karen Carter Richards, our distinguished chair, and all the members of our board of directors, we greet everybody on behalf of the Black press of America.
Absolutely. And with the news headlines today, Sheriff Aaron Applehands, a Black man, is now in charge of one of the most historically white law enforcement institutions in Wyoming, one of the country's whitest states. He is the first Black sheriff in the 131 years that Wyoming has been a state. The appointment is symbolic for both Wyoming and Mountain West, which has been insulated from much of the national reckoning over race and policing. Advocates of overhauling law enforcement say that the sheriff, his tenure will be a test of whether change can take root in a law enforcement culture that has historically entrenched itself against it. The concept of reform that everybody keeps talking about it's coming, whether they want it, whether they like it or not, said Charles P. Wilson, the chairman of the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Officers, or is that NOBLE, which represents around 9,000 Black and brown officers across the country. You can read a whole lot about this in our newspaper down in Florida. The West Side Gazette actually has a big story about this in today's editions. Dr. Chavis, so it's a historic day for Sheriff Applehands in Wyoming.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me just do a segue to the story about the sheriff. We congratulate him. We thank Bobby Henry and the West Side Gazette for breaking this story. But it also segue on behalf of the Black press, Stacy. I want to extend our condolences to all the people in Boulder, Colorado, for the tragedy that happened yesterday. And a law enforcement officer was also killed. So, and the fact that we have a Black sheriff in Wyoming, of all places, shows that African Americans are all over the United States, all 50 states, and we're striving for excellence. And that's what we do in the Black press. We not only report the negative, we report the positive. The mainstream press doesn't lift up the positive things that Black people do. So shout out to our sheriff in Wyoming. But also at the same time, we express our profound condolences. Gun violence, Stacey, is something we're going to have to do. The Biden-Harris administration is going to have to confront this gun violence. Last week it was Atlanta, people attacking and killing people of Asian descent. Now this gunmen go wild in a grocery store in Boulder, Colorado. And a shout out to Lenore Alexander, who's our publisher in Colorado, in Denver, Colorado, the Denver Weekly. And we're going to reach out to our publisher, Lenore Alexander. She's the former national treasurer of the NNPA, and let her know that she and all the people in Colorado are in the prayers of the Black press as we report the incidents. They haven't gotten out a lot of information yet. There's a press conference actually later today where we'll get more details, but I did want, on behalf of the Black press, express our condolences to the families who are the people who were murdered senselessly by another gun violence that should never have happened in America.
Yeah, absolutely. Well said, of course, Dr. Chavis. Newlywed couple and business partners Antonio and Andrea Williams say they postponed their honeymoon because they wanted to immediately launch their first retail business, Tryon Dollar Store. It's based in Charlotte, North Carolina. The business fully opened about 2 months after their wedding. Immediately following their wedding in October of 2020, the Williamses resumed their business plan. They cleverly decided to open a dollar store even during the pandemic, as cleaning products and other household items had become more essential than ever before. The dollar store instantly became a hit in their community. They surveyed nearby residents, they said, from several apartment complexes in the area so they would know what items to have in stock. They have a 1,400 square foot store, and you can again read more about that down with the county news for you, our newspaper down in North Carolina. Dr. Chavis, some Black people doing some great things.
Right, and a shout out to Fran Frower, who is the publisher of the County News. She's our second vice chair of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, doing great work in Charlotte, North Carolina. We thank Fran for reporting that story of successful Black entrepreneurs, even during the pandemic.
And speaking of the pandemic, Dr. Chavez, on a side note and a personal note, I get my first vaccine today.
Well, congratulations. Congratulations to you and your family. You want to keep yourself safe, Stacy, as well as keep all the members of your family safe. I've gotten both of my shots, and I hope that all of our listening viewers will take this pandemic seriously. The variants in some cities are on the increase. So I know over the weekend, during spring break, a lot of people are wilding out in Florida and other places. You're playing with your life. You got to keep wearing those masks. You got to keep washing your hands. You got to keep social distancing. This virus is no joke, particularly in Black communities. So please take this virus seriously. And I'm glad you're getting your vaccination.
Yeah, and I like the way you said wilding out. I haven't heard that in a while, Dr. Chavez. That shows me your hip hop roots right there.
Well, you know, I'm old school. I'm an OG.
Absolutely. And on a sad note, and here's a story you will read in our newspaper out in Los Angeles, the Sentinel and Wave and our other papers out there. Basketball Hall of Famer Elgin Baylor, who was Michael Jordan before there was a Michael Jordan, who was Dr. J before there was a Dr. J. He died from natural causes on Monday. Elgin Baylor played 14 seasons for the Los Angeles Lakers. He was an all-star 11 times. He was also the general manager of the Los Angeles Clippers. He was 86 years old. His wife, Elaine, said in a statement, Elgin was the love of my life and my best friend. And like everyone else, I was in awe of his immense courage, dignity, and the time he gave to all fans. At this time, we ask that I and our family be allowed to mourn his passing in privacy. According to the Lakers, Elgin Baylor died with Elaine, his daughter Crystal, by his side. Our condolences to the family of the great Elgin Baylor.
Absolutely. We send our condolences, and we now know that his legacy is still alive. If you look at the NBA today, compared to when Elgin Baylor first joined the National Basketball Association, it has become predominantly African-American. And so that's part of his legacy is still alive and will live on for years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Chavez, one of the things in that huge American Rescue Plan that President Biden signed last month was
last week, right?
Last week was something in there that will finally help Black farmers, Dr. Chavez. And here to talk about Black farmers is Briar Blakely. She's the Interim Director of Communications from the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. The Federation is a nonprofit cooperative association of Black farmers, landowners, and cooperatives. Good morning, Briar.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Good morning, Briar. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Fine. Are you in the Alabama base, or where are you operating out of?
Right. So I'm operating out of the Atlanta office. We have offices. We have an office here, which is the administrative office, and then Alabama, Albany, Georgia, and Mississippi.
I've been to the one in, I think, Epps, Alabama.
Epps, Alabama.
Many times in the past. I'm a strong supporter of Black farmers.
Nice. Yeah. Good times. I'm sure you got some fried fish.
Oh,
absolutely. You were there at some point.
Absolutely.
Well, Briar, tell us, I start by saying how the American Rescue Plan that the president signed this month is really helping the plight of Black farmers. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So from what we know, this particular piece of legislation is definitely something that's gonna be a reparative measure in terms of the attempt to undo past discrimination that has taken place within the USDA towards Black farmers historically. So we are excited to see the rollout and how that direct aid will be, distributed to farmers. But we are specifically excited about the heirs property support that will come from the bill as well, because we work with landowners, and a huge part of our work is the land retention aspect of the plight of Black farmers and them being able to hold on to their land and monetize the land. And so we're excited to see the bill unfold. We still have many questions. We're still waiting on additional information to come out, but we're excited about what's to come for sure.
Yeah, and we know that this has been a fight basically since for decades, for centuries, right?
Absolutely.
Why should we be more encouraged now than ever before? You know, in the past, there's been things like Farm Aid and other things, but they've missed African Americans entirely almost.
That's right. I think it's in the language within itself. This is very specific. So we've had programs, of course, through USDA before, and then it all boils down to the local levels in terms of how they assist Black farmers. But being that this is a measure to really sort of assist in economic aid for Black farmers, it's very specific. So I would think, and I'm hopeful that it will mitigate some of the challenges in terms of deciding who gets what, because it's very specific. It's for farmers of color. And so I'm hoping that the language itself is enough to sort of trickle down to our local entities, and so that there aren't any discriminatory acts, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian, can you, for those who don't really know, explain what the Federation of Southern Cooperatives do? What is the Federation of Southern Cooperatives?
So as you mentioned, we are a nonprofit organization, but what's so unique about the Federation is that we are member owned. The co-ops own our organization. And so we're made up of associations and several co-ops. And so we all collectively, we work together. Our central themes of work revolve around cooperative development, land retention, and advocacy. And in those three areas, we service Black farmers, landowners, and co-ops. And so the goal is to create these self-supporting communities and really uplift Black farmers in a way that they now, through organizations like ours, they have access to USDA programs, and they are aware of these things, because a lot of times they are neglected in terms of information getting to them. And so that's kind of where we step in to provide that technical support that they need.
Oh, okay. Dr. Chavis, I know you want to jump in. Go ahead.
Absolutely. I was brought up on a Black farming community in Oxford, North Carolina, Briar.
Wow.
And of course, decades ago, a lot of African-American families migrated to the north and to the northeast and to the northwest, kind of left the family, farmland. Now people are trying to return to farming. Can you talk about the trend now of the rise again of Black farming for men and women and children? Whole families used to engage in farming. What's the prospect of the future in 2021 for Black farming careers?
So based on what I know, and I'll kind of get personal here and not really dive too much into statistics, but okay. I know my personal journey as a millennial, I didn't see the true value of farming practices, agricultural, and land retention. It wasn't something that was, I guess, instilled in that way, but I grew up around farming. I'm from a very rural area in Mississippi. And so I saw my grandmother farm. I saw my mom farm, and my dad, he's a livestock farmer. And so growing up around that, it was just sort of in the background in the grand scheme of things. And so it wasn't something to think about. I was taught, to get an education, and that's what I did. But as I got older and I wanted to find something that was a bit bigger than me in terms of some more fulfilling work, and I was like, well, why not go back to what I know? And so for me, it was a return to the land, a return to the knowledge of how to grow and how to evolve and help communities thrive. So we're seeing a trend of millennials and younger generations start to really see the value in protecting land holdings and kind of what that means economically. Because if you don't see the monetary value of things, a lot of times you neglect that part of life. And so I'm hopeful, and I'm seeing that with the awakening of people understanding what systemic racism really is and how that is rooted in agriculture. It's subsequently allowing us to see the value in returning to what you possibly can't dismantle, and that's livelihood and being able to provide for yourself and your community. So that's extremely important when you're battling areas in life that seem to be challenged, like systemic racism. And one of the ways to dismantle that is to develop opportunities for communities to thrive, and communities of color in particular.
Well, that's so good to hear you say that, Blair. And I hope other millennials will follow your lead, because there's so much opportunity to retake our land, regain our land, restore our land, redevelop our land. In fact, owning land, the wealth materializes more than having money in a bank account. Land has value. Land is an appreciating asset. And many things, unfortunately, that African Americans buy are depreciating assets rather than appreciating assets. So thank you for your leadership. And we're going to do more than one program with you, because I think your message is so vital and expands the opportunities for millennials as they're considering what career path to take.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we're talking again with Briar Blakely, the Interim Director of Communications from the Federation of Southern Cooperatives. We're so glad to have you this morning. Good morning to Michelle Madison, Annette Phillips, Lynn Spivey, and of course, our Executive Administrator, Claudette Perry. And I want you to comment, and speaking of Claudette Perry, I want you to comment on something she wrote in. She says, Black farmers are finally getting some help. Land is the foundation of all wealth. The discrimination has been about stealing the land. My grandmother always said, if you own land, you can never be homeless. Pitch a tent if necessary. Brian, I want you to comment on that.
Right. Wow. Like, the comment Claudette made is so relatable, especially for me, because my grandmother is the reason that I am doing this work. She was a founding cooperative member of the Federation, which is the organization that I'm part of. And her work allowed my mom to then come in, who's now board president, to take up that legacy. And here I am. So it truly does come full circle. And then you start to understand and see how important it is to hold on to the land. And you understand what family land and the plight of Black farmers. We talk all the time about heirs property and what that means. And that means that families are dying without wills. And so that land is left vulnerable to a lot of times people that don't mean well, and they want to take your land. Let's just being frank. And so those conversations, like Claudette mentioned, are extremely important. It's just super important to have and pass along to future generations so that they understand.
Yeah. And then, many schools, particularly public schools, when children are coming up, they're not taught a whole lot about agriculture. Just like we're not taught a whole lot about our history. Can you talk a little bit about that as well, and the importance of an agricultural education?
Yeah, I think historically, Black people, we've been fighting to have a more culturally relevant education all around. And so a lot of times the agricultural piece of that is left out of education. And so why not integrate that? I've seen some schools, I can't remember the exact name, but there are many farm to school initiatives that are happening. One of our cooperative members in Mississippi, MAC, they do a lot of work in that arena in terms of getting food from farmers to preschool or elementary level students. And so why not teach, the value and the process of growing food? And it's not just about the growing, but it's the economic value too. I think that that's left out of education, and something we should really consider across the nation,
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Tavis, I'll throw it to you.
Well, thank you. And again, Blair is right on point. I think there's so many economic development opportunities. A lot of our millennials and Generation Z have entrepreneurial aspirations. And I can tell you one of the best entrepreneurial pathways is to go back and develop the land, get the land. I know in the Chavez family, we had a rule: do never sell land.
That's
Do
right.
not sell. If anything, buy some land, but don't sell.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm pleased that in my hometown in Granville County, North Carolina, we are on land that's been in our family for 200 years. And all of our children, all of our grandchildren, everybody knows, don't sell land.
Yeah, that is so true. Brian, you went on mute. We have to take you off mute there.
There we go.
Yeah, so Brian, one of the things I want to say, at North Carolina Central University, they used to have something called the Black Land Laws Project that plotted out how all the acres, thousands of acres of land are lost by Black Americans every day. And we need to reverse that. We need to be gaining land rather than losing land. And certainly the agricultural sector is one that we can certainly focus on going forward.
Right. And I'm hopeful that with the new bill that recently passed, we're able to focus more on the root cause of that land loss. And I think heirs property is just a language that is maybe new to a lot of people, but it's simply land loss. And it's something that we can hone in on and focus on and get to the root cause and see why debt relief is important as a piece to sort of addressing land loss.
Yeah, and Brian, we talked a little bit just a moment ago about education, but what about the miseducation? What is it that people don't get when it comes to African American farmers and farmers of color in general? What's the biggest misconception you find?
Really the same thing I thought, that it's outdated, is an outdated practice and profession. And it somehow diminishes your educational level. I think we don't understand wise people farm. You have to be very wise to be able to grow food and survive. And so I think that's just a missing link. Unfortunately, we've had some negative experiences with growing historically, in the past. And so it may have a negative connotation to a lot of people. But I think now we're starting to see that it is it's a creative process. It's innovative, and it's something that can possibly, save many, many families in the future.
Yeah, and Brian, we talked about the systemic racism and things that have continually held Black farmers back. But what has been the thing that has kept them going?
I want to say the community aspect of it. Again, farming for me takes the approach of a collective effort because I see co-ops doing those efforts and initiatives. So it's not really one farmer who is making this huge stride, but it's a group of individuals, like-minded individuals coming together. And I think that community base is really what's, helping Black farmers survive. They have to lean on one another when oftentimes they don't get the resources that they need to really make it happen, to make farming happen. So I just think, and you add in the pieces of newer generations, what legacies and practices do we want to leave behind for our children to then take up and hopefully grow in and understand.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we move forward, 2021 and beyond, what can we expect from the Federation of Southern Cooperatives?
Yes, so our work has always and will continue to, like I mentioned, evolve around cooperative development, land retention, and advocacy. So we want to continue to not stop here in terms of legislation, but there are so many different areas that also need attention. So we want to continue to do that support, to do that work so that we support our farmers and landowners and co-ops. And I think with the new legislation and opportunities that will be available, we, of course, will continue to provide outreach, technical support, and service the needs of our local communities. And so we're excited about that. We're also excited about the heirs property piece. We want to help 100 landowners per year to hold on to their land, to develop estate plans and wills so that they're not dealing with heirs property issues, and so they can monetize their land. And so those are just a few goals that we have in mind, but I'm excited to share more as we continue to develop throughout the year.
Yeah, and those wills and estate planning is also something that African Americans have not necessarily been heavily involved in. And you mentioned that piece there. In the next couple of minutes, well, next minute or so, can you expand on that?
Oh, absolutely. So just a general breakdown of heirs property is essentially when someone passes away, unfortunately, and they don't leave a will. And that we all know a will is basically the set of instructions, like how do we want the land holdings to be distributed amongst the children. But when you don't have a will, you have now your children inherit what is called heirs property. And heirs property limits you in what you're able to do with the land. So while you may feel like, hey, I own this land, technically you don't, because it's heirs property and it belongs to everyone. So you have to go through legal barriers to be able to say, hey, how do we divide this? And then heirs, as we know, the more the generations grow, the more there's no clarity or clear title to that land. The confusion just continues, and it leaves the land very vulnerable and susceptible to theft and just losing the land, really. So our goal is to help landowners recognize that, hey, you may have heirs property. So technically you don't own that land. So how do we help you clear title? How do we help you get a will before you pass away and pass along heirs property? So it's about really stopping that process, because you can't get USDA loans, some loans, when you have heirs property. And I think we kind of forget those things when we're dealing with land.
Wow, this is great information, Briar Blakely. Dr. Chavis, your closing thoughts?
Again, we thank Briar and her whole family for holding on to the Southern Federation. I think that what you're doing in Atlanta and Alabama and Mississippi and other states is so vital to the future of Black America. So we're definitely going to follow this matter dealing with Black farmers. You have our support. The Black press has always been supportive of Black farmers, and we're going to continue to. But Brad, thank you, and I hope that other millennials will follow your lead.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks again, Briar Blakely. Our Women's History Month shout out goes to Dr. Mae Jemison. Dr. Mae Jemison became the first Black woman astronaut to travel into space in 1992. And her accomplishments don't end there. Today, she's a doctor, former Peace Corps officer, and engineer. In addition, she leads the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency's 100-year Starship program, which aims to send humans outside of our solar system in the next century. A shout out to Dr. Mae Jemison. Let it be known, the best and most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or even touched. They must be felt with the heart. We will see you tomorrow.